They found my girlfriend in another man's apartment, and when I walked in, she wasn't even surprised. That's when I realized this was only the beginning of the end, but at the same time, the beginning of the truth I had to uncover for myself. I thought for a long time about whether I should tell this story, because it feels like a bad TV series, where the main character keeps suffering, losing, and at the same time trying to convince himself that all of it makes sense. But I realized I couldn't stay silent anymore, because the story drained everything out of me, my strength, my nerves, years of my life. And if I already went through this, then maybe my words will be a warning for someone. Don't repeat my mistakes. We met by accident in one of those moments that feel like fate. It was at a party with friends. She was sitting apart, staring at her phone, pretending not to care about anything happening around her. All the guys were looking at her, not because she was especially sweet or approachable. On the contrary, her beauty was cold, detached, with that superior smirk that seemed to say, "I'm better than all of you." She sat there in a short dress, legs crossed, and it felt like the whole world revolved around her. But no one dared to approach. And then I did. Why? I still don't know. Maybe I want to challenge myself. What if I can melt this ice? What if I'm the one who breaks through her armor? Now I understand it was suicide, because that's how stories begin that never end well. She looked at me when I came up and said, "Seriously? You think I'm going to talk to just anyone?" That was her first sentence to me. And you know what? Instead of turning around and walking away, I laughed, and she liked it. For the first time, she raised her eyebrows slightly, put down her phone, and said, "All right then, since you're so bold, talk." And that was it. From that moment, I was trapped. The first weeks were like a honeymoon. She could text me at 2 a.m, come over, and I'd drop everything, run, drive, just to see her. She was sometimes tender, sometimes cheeky, sometimes suddenly open, and I felt, here she is, the woman I've been looking for. With her, I wasn't bored. With her, it felt like I was constantly fighting, and I thought that fight was what kept me alive. But the more time passed, the more I realized this fight was exhausting me. She could humiliate me in front of friends. One time, when we were with a group, she said, "You do realize that without me, you're nobody, right?" And everyone laughed, and I just lowered my head and stayed silent. I didn't want to argue in public. I always justified her. She's joking. That's just her style. Even though inside, it ripped me apart. She didn't like gifts. Or rather, she liked receiving them, but never valued them. Once, I brought her a bouquet of roses. Not just any, but the one she had once mentioned she liked. She looked, grimaced, and threw the bouquet to the ground. What do you think I am, some country girl to be pleased with flowers? People were watching, passing by, and I stood there picking up those flowers, trying to smile like I wasn't hurt. But in that moment, I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. She often disappeared. She could ignore me for a day, 2, 3, and then text. I was busy. I'd ask, "Doing what?" "Why do you care?" And it killed me, but I stayed quiet, because I was afraid of losing her. She taught me to live in a constant state of waiting for a call, a text, her attention. I became addicted to these crumbs of affection. My friends stopped recognizing me. They said, "You used to be fun, ambitious. You wanted things in life. And now all you do is run after her like a dog." I got angry, brushed it off, said, "You don't understand. She's complicated. She's wounded. She needs time." But deep down I knew that wasn't true. It was just easier to invent excuses than admit I was in a toxic relationship. And then came the breaking point. She disappeared for almost 2 weeks. I texted, called, silence. I didn't know if she was okay. I started thinking something terrible had happened. I even thought about going to the police. And then after 2 weeks of nothing, I got a message. "I was busy. What's not clear?" That's it. No explanation. No apology. And I swallowed it, as always. But that evening I accidentally learned the address of an apartment she'd been frequenting lately. Someone from mutual acquaintances let it slip without realizing. And something inside me boiled over. I decided to go there, just to make sure, because my suspicions were already tearing me to pieces. I stood in front of that door, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. I saw a light through cracks, heard footsteps and laughter, and I knew right now I would either learn the truth or lose my last illusions. And I pressed the handle. When I pressed the handle of the door and stepped into the apartment, I felt like the whole world I had been building in my head for 3 years collapsed in a single second. I entered a foreign space, a foreign home, where it smelled of coffee, wine, perfumes I had never bought her, and that sharp sense of everyday coziness that kills harder than any words. There was life without me, and in that life she looked comfortable. She was sitting on the couch, calm, composed, not startled, not confused. She didn't even flinch when she saw me. She simply lifted her eyes, looked at me like it's some random acquaintance, and coldly asked, "And what are you doing here?" Her tone was so detached, as if I wasn't the guy who had been by her side for 3 years, not the one who held her through her bad nights, but just a stranger who walked in uninvited. I froze. A million words flashed in my mind, but my tongue wouldn't move. I stared at her and felt my hands shaking, my legs giving way, because I understood, now comes the answer I was never ready for. And then I saw him, a man, older than me, maybe mid-30s, well-dressed, with that confident stance that immediately tells you he owns the situation. He stood by the kitchen counter, holding a glass of wine, and didn't even try to look awkward. He wasn't hiding. He didn't drop his gaze. He calmly drank his wine and looked at me like I was some random neighbor who wandered into the wrong apartment. His calm broke me even more than her indifference, because in his eyes there was something that said, "I'm the winner here, and you've already lost." I stood there, not knowing what to say. I asked, "What is this?" My voice trembled, weak, like someone who doesn't believe in the meaning of his own question. She stood up, took a step closer, and quietly, almost softly, but loud enough for him to hear, said, "You have to understand, we have problems. I'm tired of your complaints, your control, your weakness. I need space." And those words cut my heart like a knife, because I remembered all those nights when I didn't sleep, waiting for her message, when I worried if she was alive, when I gave my last money to make her happy, when I abandoned my own plans to be with her, when she felt bad. And all of that, it turned out, was called control. I couldn't hold back and asked, "You need space? Then why are you here with him?" And again she looked at me with that cold gaze, without a drop of shame, and answered, "Because he listens to me, because he doesn't act like a victim, because with him I feel alive." That phrase killed me completely. I felt like the air was knocked out of my chest. I drowned in my own emotions. In my head, one scream repeated, "How? How after everything I did for you?" But out loud I only whispered, "And me? Who was I to you all these years?" And then she smiled, and it was the scariest smile I had ever seen. It wasn't joy, it wasn't irony. It was a smile of someone who finally tells the truth, not afraid of losing. She said, "You were a transitional stage. You were what I needed back then, but now you're holding me back." Those words will stay in my head until the end of my life, because in a single second, all my sacrifices, all my hopes, all my years next to her turned into nothing. I looked at him. He still didn't intervene. He calmly drank his wine, waiting for us to finish this pathetic scene. He didn't see me as a rival. For him, I was already defeated, a shadow about to vanish. And honestly, in that moment, I felt he was right. Inside me, two emotions fought, love and hatred. Love for her, because I still remembered the girl who once fell asleep on my shoulder on the bus, who laughed at my dumb jokes, who could call at 3 a.m. and say, "Come over, I miss you." And hatred, because now in front of me stood a completely different person, cold, soulless, a stranger. I gathered what little strength I had left and asked one last time, "Do you really want me to leave?" She didn't hesitate a second. She simply said, "Yes, it's better for both of us." I walked out of that apartment and felt like my legs were carrying me into nowhere on their own. I walked the streets of the night city, not feeling the cold, not the wind, not the people around me. I only saw dark shapes and streetlights. Tears flowed on their own. I didn't even try to stop them. In my head, her words echoed. A transitional stage, holding me back. Better without you. I walked and thought, how did I let myself become someone who could be thrown away like old trash? The next days were hell. I sat at home, staring at my phone, waiting for a message, waiting for a call, waiting for something. Every notification sound made me grab my phone, and every time it was anyone but her. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I paced around my apartment like a caged animal. I kept telling myself, maybe she'll think, maybe she'll realize, maybe she'll come back. But deep inside, I already knew she wouldn't. And yet, a week later, she wrote to me. One sentence. We need to meet and talk. And that's when I understood this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning of the story that would finish me off completely. When I received that message from her, we need to meet and talk, it felt like I was struck by lightning. I had been sitting on the couch, staring at the same spot for hours, and suddenly my phone lit up and her name appeared on the screen. At first, I didn't even believe my eyes. I reread that short sentence 10 times, afraid it would vanish, afraid it was just a hallucination. My heart was beating insanely fast, and in my head one voice screamed, she wants to talk. This is a chance. This is your chance. And another voice coldly whispered, be ready. This is where they'll finish you off completely. I didn't reply right away. I sat there, trying to figure out what words to choose, so I wouldn't look too desperate, but also wouldn't push her away. Eventually I wrote, okay, tell me where and when. She sent a location almost immediately, a small cafe on the edge of town, the same one we had been together at the very start of our relationship. And I thought, maybe this is a sign. Maybe she chose that place on purpose, tied to our memories. And once again, like always, I started building illusions. I waited those 2 days of meeting like a condemned man waiting for his execution. I couldn't work, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I lived only in anticipation. I imagined us sitting there, imagined her saying, I made a mistake, I was wrong, let's try again. I imagined everything going back, at least a little, and at the same time, I was terrified she'd say something that would finally shatter my life into pieces. The day of the meeting finally came. I got there earlier than we agreed. Half an hour early. I was already sitting at that same table where we once laughed as I told her silly childhood stories. Now that table felt cold, empty, foreign. I ordered coffee, though I couldn't even taste it. I kept staring at the door, at everyone who walked in, and every time I thought it was her, something inside me clenched. She arrived late. Of course. She was always late, and I was always the one waiting. This time was no different. She walked in as if nothing had ever happened, wearing a nice coat, her hair loose, confident, calm. She looked happy, and that was the worst part, because all this time I had been living like a shadow, broken, suffering, while she walked in so easily, like we had just agreed to grab coffee as old friends. She sat down across from me, ordered tea, and looked me straight in the eyes. The first thing she said wasn't hi, wasn't how are you, it was, we need to talk seriously. I stayed silent. I was afraid my voice would betray me. She took a deep breath and started. Listen, I know I hurt you. I know you see me as a traitor, a bad person, heartless. Maybe you're right, but I can't lie to you. I realized long ago that nothing will come of us. We're different. I don't want to build a life with someone who's always suffering and clinging to me. I need strength, not weakness. I want to live the way I want, not the way someone expects of me. Every word was like a nail in the coffin of my hopes. She wasn't even trying to sugarcoat it, not trying to soften the blow. She spoke coldly, evenly, like reading a pre-written script. I barely managed to ask, and what was I to you all these years? She looked at me like I was asking something naive and said, you were what I needed at that time. You gave me attention, care what I lacked then. But now, you're holding me back. I can't breathe with you. Inside, everything collapsed. I wanted to scream. What freedom? I never held you back. I'd only waited for calls, texts, your glance, your touch. But the words stuck in my throat. I just sat there, feeling my hand squeezing the coffee cup, so hard it was about to crack. She continued, I know you love me, and maybe you deserve someone who will appreciate your love. But that's not me. I can't give you what you want, because I don't want that life. I want another. And that's when I broke. I couldn't hold it anymore. I said, another? You mean the one you found in him? And for the first time during the whole conversation, she flinched. But she quickly regained composure and said, maybe he's closer to me. He understands me. He's stronger. With him, I feel the way I want to feel. And with you, I always feel like I'm carrying someone on my back. That was the last straw. I couldn't listen anymore. I stood up, threw money on the table for the coffee I didn't even finish, and said, thanks for the honesty. You got your freedom. Now live how you want. I walked out of the cafe, and the world around me seemed different. The city was the same. People were the same. But everything was gray, empty, like I had lost all the colors. I walked, feeling like my life had ended, because for 3 years I had lived only for her. And now, without her, there was nothing left in me, only emptiness. And somewhere inside that emptiness, her voice echoed, you're holding me back. I can't breathe with you. I knew this was only the beginning of my fall. After that meeting in the cafe, it felt like I had stopped existing. I went back home and realized the apartment was so empty, it was as if someone had ripped the heart out of the walls. I sat on the couch, stared out the window, and all I could hear in my head were her words. You're holding me back. I can't breathe with you. They looped like a broken record, endlessly. I tried turning on music, but in every song I heard her name. I tried distracting myself with work, but every line fell apart because my thoughts always ran back to her. I even went out into the city, thinking I'd distract myself with the crowd, but every girl on the street looked like her. The way they walked, their voices, their laughter, and I kept catching myself turning around, only to realize I was an idiot. Depression consumed me completely. I stopped eating properly, lost several kilos in just 2 weeks. Sleep became torture. I'd doze for an hour or two, then wake up in a cold sweat, haunted by the same dream, me walking into that apartment again and seeing her with him. That dream followed me like a curse. Every time I woke, it felt like they'd stab me in the heart all over again. I tried talking to friends. They told me, forget her, she's not worth it. Find someone else. But how do you forget someone who was your whole world for 3 years? How do you rip from your chest the moments when she was actually tender, when she smiled, when she fell asleep on your shoulder? I couldn't. I lived in the past, clinging to memories that killed me even more. And then came the worst part. She started texting me. Suddenly, unexpectedly, with no logic. At first, it was little things. Hi, how are you? Or did you eat today? Then, a photo of coffee with the caption, remember this cafe? And my heart leapt out of my chest every time. I sat there, erasing replies 100 times, terrified of sounding too desperate. Eventually, I'd send something short. Yeah, I remember. Or, I'm fine. But inside, I wanted to scream. Why are you doing this? Why are you dragging me back into this mess? One time I asked, why are you texting me if you already said nothing will come of us? She answered, because you're important to me. You were part of my life. And I don't want us to become strangers. That line tore me apart. Because on one hand, she had rejected me, humiliated me, betrayed me. But on the other, she still kept me hooked, refusing to let me move on. And like a fool, I grabbed at those crumbs of attention again. One evening she wrote, let's meet, just as friends. And of course I agreed, even though deep inside I knew we'd never be just friends. I came to the meeting. She looked radiant, glowing, as if her life was perfect. She laughed, talked about her new job, her colleagues, their office parties. I sat there nodding, but every mention of colleagues was a punch in my gut, because I thought, among those colleagues is him, that same one. I tried to act indifferent, but my fists clenched under the table. When we said goodbye, she hugged me, just a friendly hug. But for me, that touch was an explosion. For hours afterward, I couldn't let go of the feeling of her arms. And of course, I started building illusions again. Maybe there's still a chance. Maybe she'll realize. It went on like that for weeks. She'd appear, then disappear, send war messages, then ignore me for days. And I lived in that closed circle again. I became dependent on her moods all over. If she wrote, my spirits rose. I thought there was hope. If she stayed silent, I fell into a pit, sat up nights in the kitchen staring into the dark. And then came the moment that finally broke me. She invited me to a cafe, said, I want to talk seriously. Again, I arrived early, sat waiting. She was late, as always, sat across from me, ordered tea, and said, I want you to understand. What we had was important, but I can't give him up. I can't stop seeing him. He's become meaningful to me. But I don't want to lose you either. I want you to stay in my life. You understand, right? At that moment, I realized I hadn't just been betrayed. I had been used, torn apart. She wanted both him and me. She wanted me as the backup, the safety net, the emotional support. And he was her passion, her novelty, her adrenaline. And she didn't even see the problem in that. She looked at me and honestly believed I could agree. I sat there, staring into her eyes, my heart pounding harder than ever. I wanted to stand up, slam the table, scream. But all I managed was to quietly ask, so you wanted to accept that you're with him and still stay by your side? She nodded and said, yes, because you love me. You're stronger than this. You can handle it. In that moment, I realized I wasn't strong anymore. I was drained, broken, emptied out. I was a shadow of myself. And if I stayed in this hell, I'd disappear completely. I walked out of that cafe and wandered through the streets, one thought echoing in my head. Maybe she's right. Maybe real love is enduring everything. But deep in my soul, I knew that wasn't love. That was slavery. And I was already on the edge. After that last conversation, I walked home and felt like everything inside me was broken. I couldn't even explain what hurt more. The fact that she chose him, or the fact that she still wanted to keep me around, like a dog sitting by the door, waiting for its owner to maybe toss it a bone. In my head, her voice echoed, I want you to stay. You love me. You can endure it. And I realized she truly believed that. She believed I was so weak I would stay even when humiliated in the cruelest way. I got home, sat on the floor in the middle of the room, and for the first time in a long while I didn't cry. I had no tears left. I didn't even have the strength to scream. I sat there, feeling like I had become an empty shell. And that's when it hit me. I had to make a choice. The final choice. Either I stay in this game, accept the role of backup, and lose myself completely, or I close this chapter forever. That night was the hardest of my life. I paced the room, scrolled through old photos on my phone. Our trips, our evenings at home. Her smile when she first said, I love you. And I understood all of that was dead. I was clinging to a ghost. And if I didn't let go now, I'd burn out completely. The next day I texted her, we need to see each other one last time. She agreed almost instantly, as if she'd been expecting it. We met at the same cafe we always went to. She came in confident, beautiful, with that same superior smile. She sat down and said, well, have you thought it over? Will you stay? And in her voice, there wasn't even a hint of doubt that my answer would be yes. She was so certain of my weakness. She hadn't prepared for anything else. I looked at her for a long time, stayed silent. She nervously tapped her fingers on the table and said, come on, talk. I don't have all day. And finally, I took a breath and said, you know, you were right. I really was weak. I let you walk all over me. I let you kill my dignity. I let you turn me into a shadow. But you know what? This is the end. I am not your backup plan. I am not your boy for emotional games. I am not your safety net. And from this moment on, I am not yours at all. Her eyes widened. She hadn't expected this. She even tried to laugh. Are you serious? You won't survive without me. And for the first time in years, I smiled sincerely, sadly, but confidently, and answered, you're mistaken. I already survived without you. I survived hell. And if I could survive that, I'll survive life without you. She tried to say something, but I wasn't listening anymore. I stood up, left money on the table, and walked out. My hands were trembling, my heart pounding, but at the same time I felt relief, like a huge stone had finally been lifted off my shoulders. I stepped out onto the street, and the city suddenly looked different. The air felt cleaner, the sky brighter. For the first time in 3 years, I breathed deeply. Yes, it would still hurt. Yes, there would still be nights when I woke up haunted by memories. Yes, there would still be loneliness. But now this loneliness was honest. It was mine, not the kind where I was with her, yet still utterly alone. From that evening on, I never texted her again. She tried a few times, sent messages, even called. I saw her name on the screen and simply didn't answer. And every time I didn't answer, I felt like I was reclaiming a piece of myself. Like I was finally starting to live for me, not for her. Time passed. I won't say everything became easy, but I learned. I learned to live without her. I learned to wake up without waiting for her messages. I learned to look in the mirror and see myself, not her shadow. And you know what? That was the hardest, yet the most right decision of my life. Because I realized one thing. Sometimes the strongest form of love isn't holding on until the bitter end, but letting go. Letting go of the one who destroys you. Letting go of the one who doesn't see your worth. Letting go so you can save yourself. And if you're listening to this story right now and wondering if you should keep holding on to someone who only hurts you, believe me, the answer is simple. No, because no person is worth losing yourself for. I let her go, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt alive again,